If you look at the perfective aspect, here it is important for you to know, like present habitual and present progressive were little easier to understand. In present habitual we use ta, te and ti. In progressive we used raha, rahe and rahi as progressive marker or continuous marker. Here we are going to look at the perfective aspect. The perfective aspect expresses an action or a state that has been completed. In Hindi Urdu, there are 5 types of perfective forms. We call it simple perfective, present perfective, past perfective, presumptive perfective, and subjunctive perfective. There are very minute difference between the last two, presumptive and subjunctive, but important to understand. To form these, specific perfect participle suffixes are added to the verb stem. For intransitive verb, these suffixes agree with the subject, gender and number. For transitive verbs, they agree with the objects, gender and number. So here it is important for you to know transitive verbs always take the direct object. For intransitive, they do not take direct object. So this is basic difference between these two verbs. Masculine suffixes, singular ends on a, the plural ends on a, nasalized one. The feminine suffixes, singular ends on e and the plural ends on e, nasalized. This system ensures that the completed action is marked correctly according to the gender and number of the subject or object. These suffixes are added to both intransitive and transitive verbs. In Hindi Urdu, perfective participle change according to the gender and number. For verbs whose stems ends in a vowel or a glide, like wise, is called semi-vowel kind of thing, is inserted before adding the masculine singular ending a. The participles agree with the subject for intransitive verb or object for transitive verb in gender and number. So as I said, transitive always takes object, so it agrees with that object. And the agreement rules for these are, for transitive verbs, the participle agrees with the object in gender and number. For intransitive verb, it agrees with the subject in gender and number. So following are the categories. Let me give you an example before going further. If you look at this, in all perfective tense, as I said, subject takes ne, we call it ne verb. If you like, Ram ne khaya, Ram ne roti khai, and then I can give you another example. Ram gaya, Ram ghar gaya. If you look at these 4 sentences, Ram ne khaya, that khaya does not agree with the Ram because of the ne blocking the agreement between verb and the subject. So this khaya remain unchanged because there is nothing for the khaya to agree, and khana is a transitive verb, has to agree with the object if there is any. If you look at the second example, Ram ne roti khai, so khai is not because of the Ram, because Ram is blocked by ne, so object is roti and that is feminine. If you look at the intransitive verb, jana is an intransitive verb, so that will agree with the subject, so Ram gaya in perfect tense, and Ram ghar gaya, so ghar gaya not because of the ghar, because of the Ram. For intransitive, verb will always remain in agreement with the subject. So this is basic difference. Now looking at these perfective examples here, the simple perfective form shows that an action has been completed in the past and is expressed without using any auxiliary verb. In Hindi Urdu, it indicates a finished action where the verb alone carries the sense of completion. So if you look at these examples, Uma hasi, like Uma laughed, or usne likha, he or she wrote. So this referring to an action which has been completed. So it's giving a sense of completion of an action. So this is how it happens. If you look each verb here, hasi or likha shows a completed action. There is no auxiliary verb like hai or tha or hoga here in itself. It's already indicated a completed action. The verb itself conveys that the action is finished. That's why it is called the simple perfective verb. Perfective verb is already perfect. The work has been perfectly completed. Now look at the present perfect. In present perfective form expresses an action that has been completed in the recent past, but is connected to the present moment in some way. Its result, effect, or relevance still continues. In Hindi Urdu, it is formed by combining the perfective participles of the main verb with the present tense form of the auxiliary verb hona, that is hai, ho, or hu. In the example, if you look at this, हमने वो फिल्म देख ली है. We have watched that movie. Look at the perfective tense here. It clearly shows about the action. वो स्कूल जा चुका है. He has gone to a school. Whenever we have देख ली है or जा चुका है, showing a completed action, and more closely you can say giving a sense of already. So already some action has already been completed. The auxiliary hai links the action to the present, showing the result or a state still matters now. That's why it is called present perfect. Like present time is important here in this context. Looking for the past perfective, this past perfective indicates an action that was completed before another action or point in the past. It shows that something had already happened when another event occurred. In Hindi Urdu, it is formed by combining perfective participle of the main verb with the past tense of the form of the auxiliary verb hona, to be, and the past tense of hona is tha, the, or thi. So मैं खा चुका था as an example. If you look at this, I had eaten, और हमने वो फिल्म देख ली थी. We had watched that movie. Here in each sentence uses a perfective participle खा चुका or देख ली with past auxiliary verb tha, thi, or the. This combination shows that the action was already completed before another action, another past event or time reference. The key feature of the past perfective is something has already happened. If you look at the presumptive perfective, the presumptive perfective indicates that an action is presumed or assumed, referring to the assumption here, to have been completed, though it is not known for certain. It expresses probable completion of an event based on inference, guess, or logical assumption. In Hindi Urdu, it is formed by combining the perfective participle of the main verb with the presumptive form of the auxiliary verb hona, and usually it is hoga or honge or hongi, depending upon the gender and number of the subject. उन्होंने अपना काम पूरा कर लिया होगा. They must have completed the work. So उमा घर आ चुकी होगी. This example, Uma must have come home. Each sentence uses a perfective participle कर लिया और आ चुकी plus presumptive auxiliary होगा, होगी और होंगे. So in these two examples, it shows that the action is assumed to be completed, but the speaker is not certain. That's why it is called presumptive perfective. We presume that this must have happened. Now looking at the subjunctive perfective, the subjunctive perfective indicates an action that is completed in a hypothetical conditional, or uncertain situation. So unlike the presumptive, it refers to an action that may or might have been completed depending on some condition, not something the speaker assumes as likely. In Hindi Urdu, it is formed by combining the perfective participles of the main verb with the subjunctive form of the auxiliary hona, that usually referring to ho or hoi or ho, agreeing with the gender and number of the subject or object depending upon the kind of verb that are being used here, whether it is transitive or intransitive in all perfective tenses. So if it is transitive, we'll agree with the object. If it is intransitive, it agree with the subject. If you look at this example, wo pad chuka ho, he may have finished reading. पत्ते पेड़ से गिरे हो, the leaves may have fallen from trees. It use perfective participle of the main verb and also use the subjunctive auxiliary ho, hui or ho. It expresses hypothetical, conditional or possible completion, but it is not referring to any certainty. Now the next part in this grammatical categories is mood. In Hindi-Urdu grammar, verbs express not only tense, which is referring to time, and aspect, but also mood. And mood basically tells us a speaker's attitude toward action, whether it is a fact, a request, a wish, or command. So mood of the speaker referring to what kind of action that is being performed. So Hindi Urdu mainly has three modes: indicative, that referring to the statement, facts or questions; imperative, commands or requests; optative, wishes, hopes and desires. So these are important, and you as a learner must be aware about all these indicative, imperative, optative, but in a sequence of the grammatical structure, this has become important to understand and to know. In simple words, mood reflects how the speaker views or approaches the action, whether as a fact, a command, a wish, a doubt, or a potential occurrence. It modifies the verb to express the speaker's perspective rather than just describing the action itself. So, mood, therefore, is fundamentally about the speaker's stance toward an event, not merely the event itself. So first, indicative mood is the grammatical mood used to state actions, events or states as factual or to ask questions about them. It presents the action as something real or actual without expressing wishes, commands or doubts. In simple terms, it is mood of telling what is happening, what has happened, or what will happen. In indicative mode, the key features are like fact-oriented. The indicative mode is used to describe actions, events, or states as real rather than hypothetical, desired or commanded. For example, वह स्कूल जाता है, he goes to a school, is a factual statement referring to the person who's going to school on regular basis. Question formation, it is also used to form questions about actual events or actions. तुम क्या कर रहे हो? What are you doing? So this is an interrogative sentence and part of this agreement. So next is agreement with the subject. In Hindi Urdu, verbs in the indicative mood agree with the subject in both gender, that is masculine and feminine, and number, which is maybe singular and plural. If you look at this example, वह आया, masculine singular, वह आई, feminine singular. So आया agree with the subject, and that is intransitive. वह आई agreeing with the subject, which is feminine, and I is intransitive verb. Neutral attitude So this indicative does not convey wishes, doubts, commands, or possibilities. It simply states reality in a neutral manner. Then temporal reference is another part in the mood. Although mood shows the speaker's attitude toward the action, in the indicative it naturally combines with tense to indicate past, present, or future. So if you look at this example, वो आया referring to the past, वो आता है referring to present, वो आएगा referring to future. It is clearly indicated in all past, present, and future mood. Then the next is used in narrative. The indicative mood is commonly used in narration, reporting, storytelling, and daily conversation, as it describes events as they actually occur. In the indicative, verbs can appear in different aspects. It may be habitual, progressive, and perfective. Habitual describes actions that happen regularly or as a habit. Progressive describes the ongoing actions, something going on regular basis. And perfective describes completed actions. So these are all seems to be very familiar. Only you need to understand the terminology where and how it has been used in grammar. If you look at the habitual forms now, it says masculine singular form, bolta, masculine plural bolte, feminine singular bolti, feminine plural bolti, nasalized. These forms express what someone usually does. If you look at this example, वह रोज बोलता है, he speaks daily. If you look at this masculine singular in progressive form, वह बोल रहा, बोल रहे, बोल रही, and बोल रही for plural feminine. These describe actions going on right now. If you look at the example, वे बोल रहे हैं, they are speaking. Something is happening or is in continuous process. If you look at this masculine singular bola, masculine plural bole, feminine singular boli, feminine plural boli. These forms show completed actions. For example, वह बोला, he spoke. We can make almost all sentences. They spoke, वे बोले. Let me wait. वे बोले, वह बोली, वे बोली. So this is feminine plural, feminine singular, or masculine plural, and वो बोला masculine singular, वो बोला. So this is basically the combination for all the verb in sentences. Now look at this imperative mood. The imperative mood is a grammatical category of verbs used to express commands, requests, instructions, warnings, prohibitions, or advice. It allows the speaker to directly influence the actions of the listener. Unlike in the indicative, which merely states facts, the imperative conveys an attitude of insistence or guidance toward the action, telling someone what to do or not to do. And the main features of the imperative modes are future orientation. The imperative is generally limited to actions that are to be performed in the future. It cannot describe actions happening in the present or already completed. Example, if you look at the parho, read referring to action to be done. So it indicates a command that you are asking someone where subject is implied but not stated. Imperatives are primarily directed toward the second person, that is, person being spoken to, Commands or requests intend to a third person are expressed using the subjunctive objective mode, not the imperative. The second, baitho, sit down, and asking someone, but it is that someone is not stated, but it is implied that you are giving command or request, making a request to somebody else. If the same thing is happening if you say omitted subject, the subject of an imperative sentence is usually not explicitly mentioned. The listener or subject is understood form of the context and the form of the verb. For example, khao, eat, subject you imply. If I am saying to someone khao, we are giving an order or command somebody to khao. It may be subject is tum, but it is not stated, it is implied there. So if you say in the same one, if we want to making a polite request here, we can say khaiye, or in Urdu we can write like this, khaiye. So it is subject is implied. Aap khaiye, aap please khaiye, the sense is a please making a request. So these kind of things are always happen in subjunctive where subject is omitted, not expressed. Then direct and force. Directness and force. The imperative mood directly impacts the listener and its tone can vary according to the context. Depending on the situation, it can be firm, polite, advisory, cautionary, or prohibitory. So, if you look at these examples, for warning we always say सावधान रहो, be careful. Prohibition mat karo, don't do it. So these kind of things come from the statements as an example. Then we can see the agreement with the second person pronouns. Verbs in the imperative agrees with the second person in terms of social distance, intimacy, or politeness. Hindi Urdu distinguishes three levels of address that intimate to, familiar tum, and then aap. If you look at this, tu used to give commands or orders to close friends, younger people, or those addressed intimately. For example, ja, we say go. Tu is also used for the person who you love so much, whom you respect so much. So tu referring to the closeness or intimacy. So example, ja or come, pad for read. Familiar, where the subject implied is tum, used with pair or general polite conversation. For example, if you can see jao, we are asking someone to perform some action, ao or padho. So you can see this where the subject is implied as tum. The polite form is aap, used to make requests or give polite instructions respectfully to our elders, strangers, or in very formal situations. So when we say jaiye, referring to please go, means we are saying aap please jaiye, or aap aiye, or aap padhiye. So it is indicated, implied, not stated in all subjunctive form. Since imperatives are directed to you and the verb form change depending on how respectful the address is. Hindi Urdu has three levels of second person address. Those are intimate, that is tu, familiar tum, and polite or respectful is aap. Each level has its own imperative form. So if you look at this imperative form, if you look at the verb root a, meaning come, intimate is a, familiar is ao, and polite is aiye. So if you look at this form ja, the intimate form is ja, familiar is jao, and polite is jaiye. So in the same word, intimate is kha for the verb khana, familiar is khao, and polite is khaiye. For padna, the intimate is pad, familiar is padho, and polite is padhiye. For the verb likhna, the intimate form is lik, familiar is likho, and the polite is likhiye. So as for the verb kharidna, to buy, The intimate is kharid, familiar is kharido, and polite is kharidiye. So, subjunctive mood, finally, is a grammatical category of words that allows the speaker to convey attitudes towards action or events that are not definite or actual. Unlike the indicative mood, which simply reports facts or real occurrences, the subjunctive deals with situations that are imagined, wished for, hoped for, or they are uncertain. Similarly, unlike the imperative mood, which gives direct commands or instructions, the subjunctive expresses ideas in a less forceful or indirect manner. If you look at the key features of the subjunctive mood, those are expression of wishes or desires. The subjunctive is used to convey what the speaker hopes, desire or prays for. For example, वो सफल हो और वो कामयाब हो, referring to may you succeed as an wishes. Hypothetical or potential actions, that refers to describes actions that are possible, contingent or hypothetical rather than certain. अगर वो आए तो अच्छा होगा, that is conditional, like if he comes it will be good. Then if you look at the verb agreement, verbs in the subjunctive mood agree with the subject in gender and number, just like in the indicative mood. When the verb stem ends in a long vowel, it is shortened before adding the subjunctive endings, and this applies across all persons and numbers, ensuring proper conjugation in the subjunctive mood. So with this, I am sure you may have got some idea about how subjunctive works here, and this is the first part of the grammatical categories. In the next lecture, we will take up the remaining part of the grammatical categories for you, and I hope you may have got the idea about how grammatical categories functions in Hindi and Urdu. Thank you very much for listening these lectures. We will continue with another part of the grammatical categories. Thank you.